Following years of delays and development challenges, the newest entry to the iconic and classic PC franchise, Stalker 2: Heart of Chernobyl, is finally here. And this game features a massive open-world environment set in a meticulously detailed post-apocalyptic Chernobyl zone, blending survival horror, exploration, and branching narratives. And if you are wondering about its technical performance, the answer is unfortunately predictable. Another technical miss courtesy of Unreal Engine 5 and poor optimization. While stuttering isn't the primary issue this time, the game is heavily CPU bound, and this becomes painfully evident in areas populated with NPCs and or buildings. Take for example the first town in Lesser Zone. Here the 5700X3D struggles to keep up with the 3060 Ti, failing to maintain 60 FPS as frame times fluctuate erratically. And this CPU limitation got me thinking about the utility of the game's extensive graphics settings, as most of them primarily impact GPU performance. So I spent the past 4 days testing and benchmarking every graphics setting to examine the performance and visual impact of each one and see if we can improve performance without significantly compromising the game's visual fidelity. This is what we are going to explore in this video, so let's not waste any more time and let's get going. Let's begin with image quality and the upscaling options. Stalker 2 includes a full suite of image reconstruction techniques along with Unreal Engine 5's TSR. At 1440p using quality mode, DLSS delivers the cleanest image as expected. Meanwhile, both TSR and XeSS offer noticeably better image quality than FSR. And in terms of performance on the 3060 Ti, TSR and DLSS perform almost identically, while XeSS and FSR are a bit slower. At native 1440p, TSR produces a slightly cleaner image than TAA, but that comes at a cost of around 9% performance drop, and disabling AA altogether provides only a 2% performance improvement over TAA. There is also an anti-aliasing quality setting which seems to affect only TAA. It marginally enhances temporal stability when going from low to epic, with no noticeable performance costs. And finally, here is a comparison between TSR, FSR, DLSS, and XeSS using their native modes. Let's move on to frame generation. The game supports both FSR and DLSS frame gen, and FSR 3.1 is supported here, meaning you can combine FSR frame gen with DLSS upscaling. Given the game's CPU-intensive nature, frame generation here provides a tremendous performance boost, sometimes more than doubling the frame rate. It also significantly enhances smoothness and stability, at a cost of more VRAM usage and some additional input latency. And speaking of input latency, if you have an NVIDIA GPU and you are using FSR frame generation, don't forget to enable NVIDIA Reflex to reduce the input latency. So overall, I highly recommend taking advantage of frame generation, as it's currently the only way to achieve acceptable performance and stability in highly populated areas, at least until GSC Game World improves the game's CPU performance. But before enabling frame generation, we need to ensure that the base performance is within the 50 to 60 FPS range. So let's move on to the graphics settings and see how much performance we can gain, and let's start with texture quality. Here we can see a noticeable improvement in texture quality when moving from low to medium, with further enhancements to clarity as we go to high and epic. In terms of VRAM usage, the game might appear to run fine with epic texture quality on an 8GB GPU under normal conditions. However, in towns or heavily populated areas, epic textures can push the 8GB VRAM to its limit, especially when combined with high quality shadows, leading to FPS drops in these scenarios. So I highly recommend keeping texture quality at high or even medium if you have an 8GB GPU. Moving on to hair. This one controls the quality of NPC hair rendering with epic enabling hair shadows, as you can see here. In terms of performance in this area, going from low to medium costs around 2%, to high 10%, and to epic 17%. So for this one I recommend medium. Next, we have object details. Here, when switching between low and epic, we can see a subtle visual difference, such as these window shutters looking slightly more detailed when using epic. And in terms of performance, going from low to epic doesn't result in any noticeable performance impact, so I recommend leaving this one at epic. Let's move on to effects quality. This setting controls the quality and density of various effects, such as these weather and environmental effects and particles. And performance-wise, there is no noticeable impact when going from low to epic. So for this one, I recommend high or epic. Moving on to materials, this setting affects the surface properties of various objects in the game. For example, here, switching between low, medium and high changes the appearance of the ground and darkening it, and going from high to epic does not show any significant visual difference. In terms of performance, similar to the previous setting, this one has no noticeable impact, so I recommend leaving it at high or epic. Next, we have post-processing, and here switching between low and medium enables the vignette effect, while moving to high and epic slightly increases the intensity of the bloom effect. Performance-wise, there is no noticeable impact when going from low to epic, so if you like these effects, don't worry about the performance and keep this one at epic. Moving on to light shafts. This setting might be broken, as light shafts remain enabled regardless of whether the option is set to enabled or disabled. And since there is no noticeable performance impact, I recommend leaving this setting enabled for now. Let's move on to shading quality. This one controls the game's ambient occlusion, as you can see here. Low disables AO completely, while medium and above enable it and slightly increases its intensity. In terms of performance, going from low to medium costs around 4%, to high and epic 6%, so I recommend keeping this one at medium. Moving on to global illumination, this setting controls the quality and accuracy of Lumen GI, and it's most noticeable indoors, where higher options provide more accurate bounced and local lighting. Performance-wise, we can see a noticeable impact only when going to epic with around 5% cost, so for this one I recommend high. Next, we have reflections. This setting has no visual impact on large bodies of water, as you can see here. Instead, it only affects small puddles, controlling the resolution of reflections on these surfaces. In terms of performance, this is another setting with no noticeable impact, so I recommend leaving this one at high or epic. Let's move on to shadow quality. This one adjusts the resolution of shadows, as you can see here, where high and epic produce cleaner, more stable shadows compared to low and medium. Additionally, this setting affects shadow draw distance, with epic showing more distant shadows than the other options. In terms of performance, only epic has a noticeable impact, reducing performance by around 9%, so I recommend keeping shadows at high. Moving on to clouds. Under normal circumstances, this setting has no noticeable visual impact, as you can see here. However, during specific weather conditions like here, epic significantly enhances the overall look of the game. Thankfully, this improvement comes with no significant performance costs. Therefore, I recommend leaving this one at epic. Next, we have fog. This one slightly adjusts the density of volumetric fog, as you can see here. Additionally, it has an impact on other volumetric effects, such as light shafts, where all the options except epic exhibit noticeable flickering and visual issues. In terms of performance, going from low, medium and high to epic costs around 4%, which is consistent in the light shaft scene as well. Therefore, I recommend keeping this one at epic. Let's move on to sky. This setting is similar to clouds, as it only shows a visual difference under specific weather scenarios. Like in this example, where with low, the sky exhibits noticeable visual artifacts, unlike medium, high or epic. And once again, there is no noticeable performance impact, so I recommend leaving this one at least at medium. Moving on to foliage, this setting adjusts the density of the in-game vegetation like grass and trees, both up close and at a distance, and as a result, lower options exhibit more noticeable trees pop in compared to higher options, as you can see here. Performance-wise, this is by far the most demanding setting. Here, going from low and medium to high and epic can cost up to 9%. However, in certain areas like here, going from low to medium costs 20%, to high 24%, and to epic 27%. So generally I recommend medium, but if you don't mind trees pop in and you want the best performance all the time, use low. Next we have environmental draw distance. I tested this setting across various areas and restarted the game multiple times, but I couldn't notice any visual difference when switching between Near and Epic. Additionally, both options have similar performance, so for now you can leave this setting at any option you prefer. Finally, we have field of view, and it seems that changing the FOV does not have any noticeable impact on performance in this game, so feel free to increase the FOV and don't worry about the performance. So given everything we've discussed so far, here are my recommended settings for Stalker 2. Now let's see how much performance we can gain using these optimized settings in different scenarios. Let's start with this area outside towns and settlements, where the game is more GPU limited. And here I'm using quality DLSS at 1440p and medium textures with no frame generation on both sides. And as you can see, going from Epic preset to optimized settings improves performance by around 20%. Let's move to the town, and here surprisingly optimized settings improves performance even more. However, this might be due to VRAM limitations rather than raw performance, as the Epic preset exhibits more noticeable stuttering. And finally, we have this highly CPU intensive area. As you can see, the performance gain with optimized settings is much lower than before, just around 14%. This is why using frame generation is crucial to consistently maintain high and stable performance. And with that we arrive at the end. Thank you so much for watching and for your time. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if not, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.